This is Fast Love as a Short Story, written by and read by Alexander Ettinghains. John was a rather average man. At the age of 32, he had grown used to his particularly average face, his extremely average height, and his extraordinarily average personality. Accompanying this selection of average traits was a surprisingly average sense of humour, able to raise a chuckle, yet never any more than that. If you had to choose just one word to describe John, it would undoubtedly be average. It was due to his lack of any distinguishable, or even remotely exciting, features that he never really had much luck with the opposite sex. While he never suffered from any disastrously embarrassing occurrences, he never experienced any more than 2 drunken and confused kisses encountered when at parties and a passing helpless romance with a woman he met playing online bingo. A woman going by the name of A Rose for My Heart 67, whose bingo presence slowly began to dwindle before John eventually became accustomed to seeing a grey, offline text beside her username. Yet he never needed love, because John always held one thing close to his heart. One essential thing that could always, effortlessly, without fail, capture his full attention and concentration, an escape from the troubles of the real world that was always there for him. And yet recently he had begun to feel something he had never felt before. A feeling of emptiness, an emotional hole in his otherwise immaculate, impenetrable shield that was his life. And what was this loss he had found himself at? While he didn't know for sure, the only possible conclusion he could come to was that he was missing love, and so today he planned to sort that out. Fastening the tie tightly around the collar of his finely ironed white shirt he had bought just 3 days prior, he looked himself up and down in the vertical wall mirror that sat rightfully on his bedroom wall. His short, tidy, unaltered hair, he had been told by a local hairdresser that it would be pointless to try to do anything with it, and growing it out would most definitely not suit him, was looking particularly unexciting today, and his dark brown eyes he was sure would look disarmingly dashing if situated in anybody else's head, were bright and unpolluted by bags of tiredness, yet still disappointingly underwhelming. It seemed no matter what he did with his appearance, he could never find a way to make himself look conventionally attractive. But, as stated earlier, having lived with this fact throughout the entirety of his life, he had by now become used to it. Besides, the one thing that always kept him company, that was always there for him, well, that didn't care at all about John's aesthetics. After a short period of getting ready to leave, before once again finding himself pulled back to the mirror for the final check, he was ready to go. As he left his bedroom to head to the landing where his shoe rack was situated, though there was only ever one pair of shoes on display, he immediately began to regret going for that leisurely walk through the fields the night before. His smart black leather shoes were now absolutely covered in mud and multiple other undesirable brown substances, and from a quick glance down at his Emporio Armani watch, he could tell he didn't have any time whatsoever to deal with this problem. Today's speed dating began at 9 a.m, and while it wasn't necessary to be there on time, it was always best to do so, as to appear punctual, reliable, and good at timekeeping. Or, so this was what he told himself. Who knows? Maybe nobody would turn up at all. Maybe it would be fashionable to turn up a little late. But what was safe? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 20 minutes would surely be pushing it a bit. Imagine if everybody turned up 20 minutes late. Havoc. What would be the point in even setting a start time if people were going to do that? In fact, the thought of organising an event and everybody turning up late began to annoy him, and with that he decided he would turn up on time, if not for the sake of whoever had set it all up. And yet here he was, getting caught up in specifics and details, lost in his own thoughts yet again, something that happened often these days. And now the time was 8:58 a.m. Without thought, he quickly slipped his feet into his shoes and grabbed his car keys from the sideboard directly beside the rack, hastily leaving the front door out onto his drive. 8:59 a.m. Pulling up outside the community hall at exactly 9:07 a.m, he hurriedly stumbled out from his vehicle, locking it behind him quickly and frenzied. Entering the hall, all of his worst fears were realized. Everybody was already sat at individual tables trying to lay out their personalities, their likes, their interests, their turn-offs and turn-ons within the short 2-minute slot each table was given at a time. As the host of the event approached John, there was a sense of unfounded fear and apology within him, as though this charming man with a beaming smile and impressively deep dimples was going to chastise him, as though he would penalise him for turning up late for an event that was entirely optional, and that he would be pocketing all the money from. And yet nonetheless, though he knew all of this, John was afraid he was going to be openly embarrassed. A poor first impression, regardless of circumstance. It was with these worries that he nearly found himself turning back and leaving, getting back into his car and driving home, back to the safety of the one thing that would undyingly love him. But he stayed. "Good morning, sir. I assume you are here for the speed dating. You haven't turned up by accident. You'll be surprised how often we get that," the kindly man projected to him. His voice was loud and bellowing, yet comfortingly soft and friendly. It was plain to see that this was a man who had had some experience in the world of theatre. Oh, He was so tantalizingly close to lying, to stating that he had, in fact, turned up at the wrong place. Heading home, back to the comforts and warmth of... Sir? Oh, sorry. No, yeah, I'm here to speed date. To date speedily. I want some fast lovin'. He stumbled awkwardly. Whenever he tried to be informal or jokingly friendly, it never worked. He would often find himself coming across as creepy or strange. Right. There was a pause. John could actually feel some of the warmth radiated from the man's outgoing personality begin to decrease. And have you got the money? Oh, yeah, sure. With that, he reached into his black trouser pocket and produced a blue knitted wallet with a Velcro strap. With a lingering loud cracking sound, the wallet was opened and out came the payment of £20. By this point, several heads at the tables had been distracted from their equally desperate counterparts. So much for a good first impression. Fantastic! The welcoming man exclaimed, almost snatching the note from John's hand. Suddenly, the warmth seemed to have returned. It's actually extremely fortunate that you've come today. We had an odd number of speed daters, or spaters as we like to call them. If you'd kindly follow me, I shall take you to where we have one of our spaters on a spare table, or spable as we like to call it. With that, he led John along towards a table that had a single woman sat on one side. As they reached their destination, the man once again burst out into surprisingly loud speech. This here's Catrissa. Oh wait, I'm doing your job for you. Have fun spaking, spaters, he happily announced before striding away back towards the entrance. Sitting down, John spoke first. Hi, my name's... Suddenly the sound of his voice was brashly interrupted by the sound of a disarmingly loud bell. Next spable, spaters, boomed the now warmly familiar voice. The woman, who he could only trust was called Catrissa, stood to her feet and moved along, almost instantly replaced by a new girl. She had long, blonde, straight hair. Her lipstick was inviting, but not too prominent, the rest of her makeup being just as subtle, never standing out, yet indefinitely adding to what John could only assume was a natural beauty hiding beneath it. There would be no better word to describe her than beautiful, and immediately John knew he had not a chance with her. An average going for beautiful? Unheard of. Well, heard of, but always heartbreaking. He clenched his fist beneath the table and began to talk. Hi, my name's John. He almost stuttered. While it certainly wasn't interesting conversation, it was the best he could manage in the circumstances. My name's Marilyn, sweetie. Would I be right in saying this is your first time as a spader? She asked, with a genuine welcoming smile on her face. He was entirely infatuated. He couldn't take his eyes from her, yet he knew that soon the belle would be taking her from him. He had to make a good impression, and yet his lack of any form of experience wouldn't let him. Yeah, I like football. There was a pause. That's fantastic, honey. You know what sport I like the most? She said, each word lingering before being beautifully and perfectly interrupted by the next. I mean, I really like Arsenal. They don't have a name for being brilliant generally, but I support them regardless, he replied, silently disciplining himself. He was nervous and messing this up hugely. He had to pull it back. Are you definitely... Marilyn began to say, before being interrupted by that inevitable bell, followed closely by the cosy yet harsh voice of the organizer. And with that she was gone. John spent an entire hour speed dating. As the time went on, he was put in front of countless girls, each one willing to share their lives with him, willing to let him in and possibly get to know him, should he make a good impression. Yet he never did. Whether it was acting like a fumbling idiot in front of the highly attractive girls, or unintentionally showcasing his disinterest that he was trying so hard to mask in those that were less fortunate in the way of looks. But eventually he came to the realization that this wasn't what he needed. Within this taxing, stressful 60 minutes, John found himself to see that he wasn't in desperate need of love. It was something he had done without for so many years and could easily continue to do without, because, after all, he would always have that one thing that he held so dearly to him. Brucey. Leaving during the middle of one particular Spater's introduction, he quickly got back into the trusty car that had brought him here just an hour ago, speeding back towards home. Opening the door, he walked slowly towards the lounge, savouring the moment. As he came through the doorway, he reached down for the remote control that he kept on the singular armchair's right arm and pressed one of 4 buttons. As a direct result of this, a loud sound rang out through the entire house. Warm and friendly. With those 4 words, John felt whole again, complete, happy. While the mannequin made no movement, and the expression on the mask did not change, John knew that the emotions and meaning were still behind these words, and he enjoyed the moment. Nice to see you.